Welcome, I'm Dan Hood, Editor-in-Chief of Accounting Today. We're sitting down now with Colleen Knuff. She's Vice President of Audit at Wolters Kluwer. Colleen, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dan.
Now, you've been at Wolters Kluwer and in the audit profession for some time, but your current role is a little bit newer. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to the current role, and what's going on with you.
Sure. So I did start my career like many accountants as a junior auditor / tax preparer in a small firm. And, after spending a bit of time in that role, I did question, maybe I don't like tax as much as I thought. So, it opens the door to, okay, now what do I do? So I did a bit of a pivot and moved into internal audit. So I joined a life and health insurance company as a junior auditor in their internal audit department. And that was a really great sort of experience because I got to use a lot of what I was learning in my accounting background around why risk assessment is important and why control frameworks are so important from a corporation perspective. And you also get a much broader sense of kind of what happens inside of a company and how things really work behind the scenes. So we got to spend a lot more time working with people in the CFO office and as well as corporate tax and some of those other groups. And that was a really interesting experience for me. But it also led me to think about things a little bit more from an IT perspective. So way back in college, my minor was in, computer science. And I realized that I had more of an interest in that perhaps than I thought I did. So I did move into a sort of an IT audit role and did some professional designations around both internal audit and IT audit and did that for a number of years. And then decided to actually move back into a firm. So I went back to, joined PricewaterhouseCoopers in their internal audit practice, but still kind of with that IT bent on things, and discovered that they had an internal audit product called Teammate that was very interesting to me, and having conversations with customers about how to implement technology and train your staff and do those kinds of activities. And joined that Teammate team on a full-time basis. And then Teammate actually joined Wolters Kluwer and became a part of that family in 2008. So I went along for the ride and the journey and had the opportunity to spend even more time with internal auditors in different corporations and governments around the world and got to hone my craft around product management and spent a number of years doing that. And then earlier this year, was given the opportunity to take all of those skills that I had learned in product management and bring them over to the external audit side of the portfolio here and get reacquainted with CPA firms and their processes and what they need from a technology perspective. So I like to think of myself as this like sort of perfect advocate for auditors. I have walked a mile in their shoes. I know exactly when they describe a pain point, I can empathize, I can feel that pain, and then turn around and do something productive with that in our product portfolios.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, you're new to the role, but you come with a tremendous wealth of experience from pretty much every aspect, right? Every angle, right? Corporate, public accounting, technology. So you've got all the bases covered and you got deep experience with audit. So I know you're paying attention to major trends, things that go on. What are some of the big things you're looking at as we go into 2022?
Well, I think like many firms and other organizations, one of the biggest trends is really around emerging technologies and how can we harness those technologies to actually work for us? A few years ago, there was all this concern that these emerging technologies and the bots were all going to come get our jobs. And I think we've learned anything but that is true. We need to actually harness these technologies to help us get the work accomplished that we need to get accomplished. And so that's been an interesting thing because when we think about anything from robotics process automation, so those bots that we were also concerned about, trying to harness those and use those is a mechanism to automate some of the routine and more mundane aspects maybe of our day-to-day life. We might take that a step further or a step deeper and start looking at APIs and API frameworks, because I know one of the things that firms are trying to do is take their best of breed tools within their tech stack and get them to talk to each other, right? Like let's knit them together and create an ecosystem rather than having all of these separate products across the board. So harnessing the power of APIs to create that interconnected ecosystem is a big move or a big trend. But then we also see things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. So if I'm going to ingest trial balance information, maybe I can have, machine learning actually do a bunch of grouping of accounts together, and I don't have to do that work. I'm just looking at the exceptions or the things maybe that the machine learning hasn't seen before. So we're reducing the number of tasks that they're having to perform. And then all the way through to blockchain, right? And so that's relatively new. Everybody's still sort of looking at that and wondering what blockchain can do for us. But in many cases, blockchain can be that mechanism in the background that helps ensure that we are requesting and getting data back, and it's secure and it's immutable, and it's all those things that we know the blockchain does a good job of. So that's the first major trend is that emerging technology, and then kind of playing off of that is that how do we start using those advanced technologies to do a better job of those high volume, high transaction work that we have in our workflows. So things like audit or bank confirmations, we do those in every single audit. Can we find a way to get the emerging technologies to do that on our behalf? I mentioned like the grouping of accounts, right? That's a high volume. Like if you've got a ton of accounts that come in, nobody wants to sit through and click through and identify a grouping for every single one of those. Let's make sure that we're using those technologies to do that kind of work for us. I mean, so those are the two sort of big, I'll say, key technology trends.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's when you lay it all out like that, people always say, oh, yeah, technology, it's a big deal. When you lay all out the specific details and the way it can be leveraged, the opportunities it offers, it's really, it's pretty impressive. And definitely, as you say, makes sense to be paying attention to it all. Are there other areas, though, beyond technology that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, sure. And I think, under the broad category of people, right? We talked about technology. Now let's talk a little bit about people. And the first one of those is around staff shortages. I think every firm out there is experiencing this in some way, shape, or form. Either through, everyone's talking about the great resignation, either through people leaving the firms and choosing to pursue something else. But even with students coming up through universities and colleges, right, the enrollment in sort of accounting programs is down from what it used to be. And so that, we know that they're not going to come in the same volumes that they were because they're not coming into the university system in quite the same way. So that's going to create some challenges around staff shortages. And then following on with that, is firms continuing to move to the cloud. So a lot of them early on in the pandemic made some decisions to move to the cloud, or in the process of trying to move to the cloud because they realized that they had to create these hybrid work situations to support their hybrid workforce. And some of those were early decisions, and now firms are trying to articulate what their plan is going to be for a further move to the cloud.
Gotcha. I would love to dive deeply into all these, but particularly those last two trends are around people and the cloud. You talked about staffing shortages. You talked about the issues that firms are having. Maybe we could dive a little more into that. What are some other things you're seeing firms do, or that you would recommend that firms could do to overcome that kind of great resignation style challenge?
Well, I think there's a few things, and I think firms are going to have to participate or try out several of these. I don't think there's one sort of silver bullet solution. But if we talk like early on in that sort of front end of the of students coming in, I think reaching out and getting a little more involved with our local colleges and universities to be able to talk to those sort of first year students around the value that we provide to society and our clients as auditors, and what that really means. Because I think in many cases, sort of the old definition maybe is what's in their minds as when they think about accounting as a profession. So helping to educate them on how that's changing and the different types of services and value that we do provide to our clients is important. But then with the existing staff search, so that's great, but that doesn't solve my problem next year, Colleen. So what other things can I do? I think there's a few other things that firms need to take a look at. One might be the flexibility around better supporting these hybrid workforces that we do have today. I know personally, I have staff that can't wait to go back to the office, and I have staff that are quite keen to continue to work from home for a variety of different reasons. And I don't think that firms are going to be much different from that. So continuing to provide that flexibility in how we choose to work, I think will be important to keep the staff we have, right, and to attract staff into the firms. Taking a look at remote work as an option. So You may not be able to find the people that you need in your local city or your local community, but you might have to look a little farther afield and consider that certain skills or subject matter expertise may have to come from someplace else, and ensuring that your platforms and your collaboration that you've established over the pandemic will support that sort of farther afield type staffing model. And some firms are even looking at outsourcing, like more officially entertaining the idea that we will have an outsource arrangement that will take care of certain aspects of our portfolio of clients in order to be able to perform that work. And you might find that you're kind of doing a little bit of all of those things in order to help manage the staff shortages.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting when we talk about staff shortages. You mentioned earlier, people had been concerned about technology taking away jobs from accountants. Well, now there's not enough accountants. We have too many jobs and not enough accountants. Technology definitely can play a role there. And a key thing there is the cloud, right? Because it makes you able to, as you talked about, remote work and hybrid work, and people working from home or hiring people from all over the country and even the world. The cloud's a big role in that. You talked about the how many firms and businesses in general moved to the cloud at the beginning of the pandemic. So we know a lot of them made that move. I don't know how many of them made it in a really thoughtful manner or in a manner that they want to keep up. So maybe we can talk a little bit about when audit firms are looking to transition to the cloud. What do you think some of the best practices they should be paying attention to or they should be implementing?
Yeah, you're right. Early on in the pandemic, some of them had to make some fairly immediate decisions, and having the opportunity to sit back and evaluate how well that actually worked out. So I think of it from a technology perspective, but if anybody's familiar with the concept of a retrospective, like what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, and what do we want to change or think about changing in the future, that's a great place to start. And I think that really leads into that change management aspect of things going forward. So now that we have some time to be a bit more thoughtful and plan out a move to the cloud, I think there's a few things that firms need to consider. One is just gauging the level of acceptance around change inside the firm. We've all experienced a lot of change, which means in some cases, some firms are like, all right, the ball's rolling and people are much more open to it. But then in other instances, there's just change fatigue going on. And so there's, not quite the same opportunity to continue to push change forward as quickly as maybe we did in the past. So when I think about sort of that move to the cloud, I think there's a couple things that firms need to think about. One is, where do they want to start making that change first, right? So think about planning that out. It doesn't have to be a big bang. So it doesn't have to be everything moves at once. So think through what your strategy would be around moving aspects or parts of the workflow to the cloud, and partners that will support that gradual sort of move to the cloud as well, right? That's an important part of thinking through this. And then the second part of it is around actually getting your data migrated across to the cloud, right? So what is that going to look like? Who's going to participate in that process? And am I giving myself enough time to plan and complete that process, and so that it doesn't feel rushed, particularly if it's being managed around some sort of a busy season. So that's probably another big thing that we need to think about. But then there's the positive side of things too, right? So when we talked about staff shortages, one of the places that firms are seeing staff shortages is really around their IT staffing. So if you have a collection of on-premise applications, you need staff to help manage that and ensure that everyone has access and all the rest of that. So hiring out to cloud providers might be a good solution in that instance, because cloud solutions do a good job of managing that. Things like more frequent updates kind of come along with cloud applications. You don't have to think about planning the next upgrade necessarily. As well as things like data security, data privacy, data jurisdiction. Those are things that cloud providers do a really good job of managing and being experts at, so that you don't have to. And I think that's another sort of positive thing that firms need to think about when they're planning their move to the cloud.
Awesome. I'm glad you highlighted that positive aspect, and you've done it from time to time throughout our talk here, because for all that there are, we all know there's a pandemic. We all know there's tremendous impact of technology and potential, disintermediation. It's all these different things that feel kind of scary. There's a lot of change to manage, but at the same time, there's tremendous opportunities and there's benefits in all sorts of areas that are brand new. When you look at the future of audit, what are you excited about? When you look forward, you go, this is going to be great.
Well, audit is certainly not a field that's stagnant. That's probably the most exciting thing about it, right? There's lots of opportunity for us to continue to grow, whether that's using emerging technologies and harnessing those and bringing those into the workflows, or if it's even things like better use of data analytics. So I know when I started off my career, which is more years than I'll care to admit to, data analytics was the thing that we talked about, but you almost needed an advanced degree in data science to really sort of be able to perform it. And that's not true anymore. A lot of the data analytics tools that are in the market are much more intuitive to use. They're easier, and we tend to see that staff coming, and the junior staff we're bringing in that are coming out of college and university programs are a little bit more familiar with them as well, right? So you're not having the same sort of training aspect that maybe we did a few years ago. But data analytics, being a part of that whole data-driven approach that we're trying to drive to, I think that's probably the next exciting frontier on this. And it's not just that data means more data analytics throughout the process, and it's you could do things like 100%, population testing and all of those exciting terms that we like to throw around. But the fact that the data that we actually create in the process of performing our own audits, visualizing that and understanding the value that data can bring, so that we have a better sense of how risk connects to procedures and whether we're over or under auditing, because we can see those relationships, and not just in an index, a file index, but rather visually, on a screen. I think those are really exciting things that we'll start to see happen as audit continues to progress and unfold.
Absolutely. There's some very exciting tools, very exciting capabilities coming for the auditors right now. I mean, they're all coming out already, but we're going to see a lot more of them going forward. That's going to be great. All right, Colleen, I want to thank you for sitting down and talking. It was great to have a chance to get to know you a little bit more about you.
Well, thanks, Dan, for the opportunity, and I hope we can touch base again soon in the future.